Anti Society, welcome back to the Antisocial Planet. Today we are checking out Dreamcatcher's BEcause dance practice. I'm obsessed with this song. I feel like that came across in my reaction to the song and the music video, but it's getting to the point where I'm like, I need to see everything that is involved with this song and this music video, and a lot of those are like performances, so I always like to check out the dance practice before I get into the performances because I don't want to get distracted by deconstructing the choreo whilst I'm trying to enjoy the other parts of performance. So I'm always excited to get into some more dance practices though, because they're usually real good, and I'm excited to see how the storytelling continues with incorporating the choreo into the overall song. Getting like a little intro and everything. Ooh, geez, hang on. That freaked me out with the intro right out the gate. Ooh, I love how they start on opposite ends of the line. Great way to get you at the center. Ooh. Okay, one is cute. Two, I feel like it's too quiet now. You can't freak me out with the intro being super loud and then make it quiet. Second, third, fourth, I don't know. Fit check. Look at them all. Beautiful. Second, third, fourth, fifth, I don't know anymore. Look, I'm gonna give up numbers. That's not what we're here for. We're here for music and dance. Love this little like, you know, like hand under the chin movement, because like I was saying when I was checking out the song, I was like, there's this feeling of a like nursery rhyme or child song, like game to the melody that they are choosing. So having this almost like childish, playful movement incorporated into the choreo is really nice. But also the like knee thing that where they like angled out their knees before standing up. I'm like, dang, my legs hurt. But great use of levels and stuff like that. With that like neck movement too. Ooh, they lead with the shoulder when they stand up too, which is good. Guyan, please. Ooh, love the hand movements. Ooh, the lift, dang. Almost like the marionette with the lift. Yeah, they have the strings. They're like pulling the strings around her. Oh, okay, so ma'am, I have a few. See, because they're like holding the strings around. Great use of stabilizing from all sides. Like literally, like everyone has their hands on her to make sure she's good for that lift, except like Gaia, who's kneeling down in front. But there's so much support to that lift, which is also really great to see. Like it's not just the lift itself. There's also them making sure that everything is safe, especially since you're like moving quickly in and out of that movement. And on stages, like stages are a bit of a gamble of what you're gonna get, because some stages you've got some good grip, some you don't. What are you wearing for shoes during that performance too can change depending on where you're at the performance and like how the performance has evolved. You always need to like make sure that there are safeguards for that kind of a movement. It's like whenever I see some choreo, especially like in K-pop, where there's some crazy things like lifts or jumps or flips or like all of these kind of acrobatic moves in certain choreo, I always get super nervous, not just because the move itself is really difficult to pull off, but because how do you know which stage you're going to be on is going to be able to accommodate that move properly and safely? It always just freaks me out a little bit, even though I know that they've practiced a lot and there are definitely safety meetings to weigh the pros and cons of that. They have a lot more to lose in that performance if something were to go wrong and someone to get hurt. But still, it's nice to see. But with Sua's part where they all gestured in almost like they were going to grab her neck and then they grabbed their own, very interesting to flip that movement of a threat and then flipping it into something that is more like self-induced, which I think is really interesting given the story of the song, which is very much this back and forth of a toxic relationship and the person who is on the side of making it awful, right? The toxic person in that relationship, to have this back and forth of love and threat and guilt and also anger and frustration, right? So having that be like the threat of going to grab in where Sua is and then grabbing their own necks instead. Or it could even be the trying to guilt that person into feeling bad of, look what you've made me do. That happens a lot in toxic relationships, is whenever the person does something that is awful to the person they're in the relationship with, a lot of the time they will turn it on them. Like, well, if you didn't do this, then I wouldn't have behaved that way, even though that's not an actual justification for it. But it's interesting to bring that back and forth. And even this marionette imagery of someone else pulling the strings, you could have that from the perspective of this person who's stuck in this relationship is tied up with these strings and being made to act a way that they don't actually believe in, or putting on an act like they have this whole kind of play nice feeling to the lyrics, do as I say feeling to it. Or it could also be, again, going into that kind of like guilt of like, I'm just behaving this way because you keep doing this and this and this, right? So it's really interesting to bring that in. I really wish that I could have like the lyrics along with each part of it, because that would make it so much easier to match up what they're doing at each part. But I'm trying to like pull as much as I could remember, and great use of layers, and the speed of which they're moving from different parts is really impressive too. They've covered a lot of ground. I'm like 30 seconds in. I love the out of sync movements. Xiang. I love that movement, the like hug. Ooh, that was smooth. Ooh, the heart that they drew. Okay, Dami, I'm not ready for your part, especially dressed like that. Okay. Very smooth at the leg move in here, especially Gio at the front. I was like paying more attention to her at the front, but also really good use of like layers. Like they're literally having an up and down motion to the choreo, which I think is really great, because I talked about how I liked in the vocal melodies where they were going from this lower register and then going up into these higher registers, especially for the softening out of like the because I love you, right? Like softening out that particular part in contrast to like Dami's part where she's having a lower register and there's a more like aggression in her talking about being angry and stuff like that. So there's literally this kind of like up and down motion to the vocal range, right, in the song, and then having a literal up and down motion within the choreo too, but always from this place of like power. Like even when they're leaning down, between their facial expressions and the way that they're having these exaggerated, like very controlled movements, is always like showing that they are in a position of control and power within the whole performance, which I think is really great. Gayan, look, her facial expressions are always so good on stage, but she's particularly good at having that slightly evil gleam in her eyes that is just captivating, but also I need her to calm down. That move, so good. Look at her. I love that like quick tick of the head as well. Good reveal too. Like someone hidden behind the exterior. Ooh. Okay, I really like the controlled movements very close to her that Dami has. And then that like when the strings come in, they're alternating in that line that they're in. Again, great use of these head ticks, right? So we have the ticking almost movement of them moving their head back and forth, but we had it in the chorus too, where there was a hit in the percussion and they all quickly ticked their head to the side. Despite all of the control that they're having in these movements where they're drawing them out and having like really great like floatiness to some of them, like they had the one hand movement, like very loose hands in that motion, so it has this very laid back, controlled, unbothered feeling to the performance. And then you have these ticks, these moments of the control or the facade like dropping, and they're not able to keep up the performance of who they want the world to perceive them as, which is really a cool little detail to put into it. It adds into this musicality of they're hitting on certain beats, but it's also bringing this off-kilter feeling to the whole thing. The like chest movement there. And with the like hip movement too. Isolation. Ooh, I love the like shoulders. Wow. Wow, we covered ground there. I also love the bow, right? Again, this faux show of respect, but without all of the actual feeling of showing that respect to someone, because it's like the bow, but they're not lowering their head, right? They're maintaining eye contact. Part of that is like a performance. You don't want to hide your face, but if you were actually going to bow to someone, obviously I come from a culture where that bowing is not as prevalent as a thing as in South Korean culture, but from what I can understand of it, one of like the big parts of bowing is like showing humility towards someone, and part of that is lowering your head, right? Because there's a certain vulnerability to that movement of not lowering your head and bowing before someone, and them not lowering their head at the same time. They're maintaining eye contact, so that humility isn't part of that motion in the way that it should be. I really love a lot of Jio's parts where she's having these really floaty, fun movements, and she does a great job with her facial expressions of having this carefree, fun look, but there's this sinister undertone to it, which is just a really great performance, even in this part. But Xion covered a lot of ground there. Depending on the stage, it's gonna be a lot. Thami, just no justification, no notes, just Thami. Guyan had covered a lot of ground there too. Ooh, that shift in her facial expression. God, Guyan's such a good performer. So, man. But also, I was thinking, I really like a lot of the mirroring and like having multiples. Obviously, there's going to be like more than one person doing emotion most of the time because you're choreographing the whole group, but I really like that they're separating into these like threes for it, because it's, even though there's one person saying the one thing, there's like, this copy of it, which makes me feel like two-facedness, right? So we have a great reveal there with Handang. Like part of that is like the formation and trying to keep it even with the numbers, but it's also great to reveal this like almost like true person behind the exterior, or they're like being more layers there, like you never really know who you're going to get. But also having the threes is like there's more like faces to this person, there's more sides to this person other than just like the focal point. Like you need to pay attention to the other like people and like possibilities around them. But I think it could also be that this isn't a one-time thing, right? I think that a lot of the things that they're talking about in this song, unfortunately, are things that a lot of people can relate to and have some kind of experience with. Dealing with toxic people, especially those who want to maintain control and power in a relationship, is not uncommon. And I think that it's interesting to have this almost like mirroring or copying with that, especially since in a lot of the times for someone who does find themselves in a toxic relationship, who is, you know, the victim in that instance, or the person who is on the receiving end of that need for control, they tend to mirror the person that they're with in order to make sure their behavior fits properly, especially when they're being perceived in public or by others. So they try to match that person's behaviors when they're in public because they're trying to put forth a certain kind of image or persona that isn't going to get them into any further trouble, right? So it's interesting, and probably I'm thinking too like far into it, but it's a really interesting detail to put into the storytelling for this. Ooh, almost like metronome ticking. Xion, don't smile at me like that. Wow, they switched onto that floor position really fast. The like slow motion and then whipping her leg around to get that motion. Dang. Ooh. The two on the sides having to do that even more though. Oh, that movement being passed around. Ooh. cool. I love them all stomping at the same time. I was also thinking they've had a few times where they've had to cover quite a bit of ground, like moving in and out of the formations, which I also think is interesting, not only just dynamically if you're like following people throughout the formations that they're having, which are also really good. There's so many in this. They're transitioning so much, and a lot of it is central. So they're going to have to keep that interesting because they're not doing a lot of movement back and forth across the stage space. So because they're keeping it in this central part, and maybe the part of that is the practice space they have, maybe that's just, it's easier to adapt that to different stages depending on where they're at. But because of that, you're going to have to keep the formations interesting and have lots of movement within that smaller space to ensure that the dynamics are like kept there, especially since I was saying they're moving really fast. There's lots of interesting motion and dynamics to this. So they're doing a really good job with that. There's a little bit of weird blocking in some of the parts because they have these like extended arm movements, but I don't know if that is like just a, I don't know, byproduct of them choosing specific movements for the choreo, depending on how they're working with the layers, or if that's intentional, like obscuring the image of the person who's talking, because I feel like that fits into a lot of what Because is about as well. Like we even had the masks incorporated into the music video, so that could be like an intentional thing to block the face temporarily of whoever is actually the focal point of the performance, especially if you're going to have a close-up from a camera or something. You're going to see like part of their face obscured during that choreo, so maybe that's intentional, maybe that's just like a consequence of the kind of movements that they want to put into it. But I want to mention it, just a thing that you have to work around, especially if there's a camera involved for it. But lots of like big movements in and out of the formations, which I think could also be part of the storytelling of like almost monitoring, right? There's lots of feelings within the lyrics of watching someone and keeping track of what they're doing and saying and making sure that they're behaving the way that you want them to and performing the way that you want them to in public spaces. So having this person moving in and out of the formations is like they're keeping tabs on everyone involved, which is very interesting. Like again, that image of control over a situation. Sua though, I know that she's just like walking and motioning with her arms for the other members to do motions, but like whenever Queen Sua comes through, it just does something. I love that motion too with the neck. Love the stomp all together. Ooh, go off. Sua, ma'am. I'm trying not to be distracted by some of the subductive movements. Lost my train of thought. Okay, we're gonna go back. But I'm trying to not get distracted by some of the seductive movements because I know that's what they're trying to do, okay? I paid attention to the song lyrics, okay? I know that you're probably doing that as a distraction. Because again, there's this whole theme throughout the song of because I love you, right? And I think it's really interesting to have this song come out after Poison Love in the previous album, which again, I don't know how close there is an actual connection between those two, but they do very much feel like two sides of a coin, which I think is really fascinating for them to have both sides of a story in two different releases. But Poison Love was a lot of I keep coming back, like I keep coming back to this, hoping that I'll get something different, that I'll get that spark, that happiness that I felt when this relationship started. And I just keep coming back, even though I know it's not going to work out. It's going to be the same as it always is. It's going to be awful. It's going to be poisoned. I keep coming back in the hopes that it'll be different this time. And then having this where there are these like more subductive moments and this love bombing of because I love you. I'm only doing this because I love you. And having the more seductive movements put into this in contrast to some of the more heavy hitting, especially in like the breakdown there with Sua at the front of these like really hard hitting movements of the shoulders and the arms and the legs, in contrast to these slowed down, more seductive movements. It's like the contrast, the jarringness of having those soft, more drawn out, loving movements in contrast to the more aggressive ones. And I just find that fascinating. But the spin that they all did and that head jitter thing, so good. I love that leg swing around. So good. Like the, I don't know, wave or cannon across. I mean, I kept watching Gaia. Her facial expressions are so good. And the switch that she does, smiling, sweet, sometimes more on the seductive side, and then switching off and she's staring into your soul. And I'm just like, ma'am, I'm gonna need, I always say that she has too much stage presence, but there's something about her in this performance that just unacceptable. But really great choreo and performance, and I just really wish that I had the lyrics up at the same time so that I could directly compare what lines they're singing and what the actions are. But I tried to pull as much as I could from what I could remember. Wow, even my reaction to the dance is longer than it usually is for this particular track. Hopefully I said something insightful in that. But yeah, really good choreo, honestly. I feel like I got pulled into some of the more technical aspects or storytelling parts of it. But again, lots of formations, lots of movement, and also the contrast between the more aggressive, hard-hitting movements and these more drawn-out movements. There's a lot of energy that you have to put in those hard-hitting movements. And it's one thing to stay in that pocket for the whole time. It's another thing to regulate that motion as you're going through, to have that more aggressive, faster-paced, sharper movements, and then being able to slow down into those more languid ones and keep in sync, keep on time, and have those little tick things too. Like they're doing those like quick head movements or shoulder movements or leg movements that are supposed to be happening at the same time, especially in this setting. If you are in a live setting, you have your in-ears and you can get counted in for certain things, and you probably have a metronome. But when you're doing it in the dance practice room like this, you have a little bit less support for that. And the fact that they're able to stay in sync, stay on time with each other is fantastic, and a lot of energy in this. This would be a tiring performance and you have to make it look easy, right? Their facial expressions were on point even in this, and you have to have that laid back, confident, in control facial expression the whole time, except when you're putting in that more sinister side to it, but always in control. So you cannot look exhausted during this or look like you're having a hard time, because it'll ruin the illusion of the performance. And they did a great job. I'm just, again, obsessed with this song, and I just need to see more stuff about it. I hope you enjoyed watching that along with me. You can click this playlist to go to my previous reactions, or you can subscribe to this next time I post a Dreamcatcher reaction, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.